Hey guys, welcome back to the Atlas Archives Deep Dive series, where we journey through the stories, landscapes, and souls of every nation on our planet. Tonight, we're heading to Bosnia and Herzegovina, a heart-shaped country nestled in the crossroads of civilizations. From the soaring peaks of the Dinaric Alps to the emerald waters of the Neretva River, from ancient Illyrian fortresses to Ottoman bridges that have stood for centuries, this land has witnessed empires rise and fall, cultures blend and clash, and through it all, an enduring spirit of resilience. In this episode, we'll drift through mountain valleys and historic cities, tracing the footsteps of Romans and Slavs, Ottomans and Habsburgs. We'll explore how geography shaped destiny, how diversity became both treasure and trial, and how a small nation at the heart of the Balkans came to embody one of history's most profound stories of survival and transformation. Before we dive in, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. We love seeing how this community spans the globe. And if you're finding value in these deep dives, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode as we continue our journey through every corner of Earth. Now, grab your favorite blanket, settle into a comfortable position, and let's begin our peaceful exploration of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Chapter 1: Introduction and Ancient Foundations, Illyrians to Roman Era. Welcome to the Atlas Archives, where history unfolds gently, like the turning of ancient pages. Tonight, we journey to the heart of the Balkans, to a land where limestone mountains pierce the clouds and where rivers carve their stories through stone. This is Bosnia and Herzegovina, a country whose very landscape tells tales spanning millennia. As you settle into this narrative, imagine standing on a high plateau in the Dinaric Alps, feeling the cool mountain air against your skin. Below you, valleys stretch like green ribbons through the karst terrain, and in the distance, the whisper of ancient rivers echoes through deep gorges. This is a land that has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, each leaving their mark upon its rugged beauty. Bosnia and Herzegovina occupies approximately 51,000 square kilometers in the Western Balkans of southeastern Europe. Though modest in size, this nation contains an extraordinary diversity of landscapes. The Dinaric Alps, that great limestone spine of the Balkans, dominates nearly two-thirds of the country, creating a mountainous realm where peaks rise above 2,000 meters. Mount Maglik, standing at 2,386 meters, crowns the southeastern border with Montenegro, a silent sentinel watching over the land. The very geography of this region has shaped its history in profound ways. These mountains, with their steep ridges and hidden valleys, have served as refuge and fortress throughout the ages. The limestone terrain, formed over millions of years by ancient seas that once covered this land, has created one of the world's most extensive karst landscapes. Here, water disappears into underground rivers, carving vast cave systems and emerging in crystalline springs that feed the country's many rivers. To understand Bosnia and Herzegovina's story, we must journey back through the mists of time to an era when Europe itself was taking shape. Long before nations drew borders on maps, long before the names we know today existed, people made their homes in these valleys and mountains. The earliest traces of human presence here reach back to the Paleolithic period, some 14,000 years before the Common Era. In a cave near Stolac, in what is now Herzegovina, ancient hands carved images into stone. These engravings at Badanj Cave include a remarkable depiction of a horse pierced by arrows, preserved across the millennia. This artwork, dating to approximately 12,000 years before the Common Era, represents one of the oldest Paleolithic monuments in southeastern Europe. It speaks to us across the vast gulf of time, a testament to the artistic spirit of our distant ancestors. As the glaciers retreated and the climate warmed, Neolithic peoples established settlements throughout the region. Archaeological sites at Butmir near Sarajevo, at the Green Cave near Mostar, and at numerous other locations reveal communities that practiced agriculture, created pottery, and developed increasingly sophisticated tools. These Neolithic cultures represented a crucial transition as humanity shifted from hunting and gathering to settled farming life. The heritage of these early settlers forms the deepest layer of Bosnia and Herzegovina's cultural archaeology. At places like Kakanj and the caves near Konjic, evidence shows a continuity of human habitation spanning thousands of years. The people of these Neolithic communities built their lives around the rhythms of planting and harvest, their settlements often positioned near water sources and fertile land. Yet it is with the arrival of the Illyrians that Bosnia and Herzegovina's recorded history truly begins to crystallize. During the Late Bronze Age, around the 8th century before the Common Era, Indo-European peoples, known as the Illyrians, established themselves across a vast territory stretching from modern Slovenia and Croatia through Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, Kosovo, and Albania, reaching into northern Greece. These were the people who would give their name to this entire region, Illyria. The Illyrians were not a single unified nation, but rather a collection of tribes, each with its own territory, customs, and political structure. They spoke languages related to modern Albanian, and they developed a distinctive culture marked by impressive metalwork, elaborate burial practices, and formidable warrior traditions. From the 8th century before the Common Era onwards, Illyrian tribes began organizing themselves into kingdoms, creating the first complex political structures in this region. The Dalmatai tribe held sway over much of western Bosnia and the Adriatic coast of Dalmatia, from which that region derives its name. The word itself likely comes from an ancient term related to the Albanian word for sheep, reflecting the pastoral economy that sustained these highland people. Archaeological evidence from numerous sites in Bosnia confirms that Illyrian tribes specialized in raising sheep, pigs, and goats, their lives intimately connected to the rugged terrain they called home. Further inland, other tribes carved out their territories. The Daesitiates, known for their fierce independence and warrior prowess, controlled much of central Bosnia. The very landscape seemed to shape their character, as mountains and valleys created natural fortresses that made conquest difficult. To the northeast, where Celtic migrations had created cultural mixing zones, the Skordiskai emerged as a hybrid Illyrian Celtic grouping, representing the complex ethnic tapestry of ancient Balkans. The Illyrians built their settlements strategically, often on hilltops and elevated positions. These fortified places, called gradina, featured massive defensive walls constructed from carefully fitted stone blocks. The most impressive of these ancient citadels is Daoson, located in the Neretva River valley near modern Stolac. This was the capital of the Daosi tribe, who flourished between the 4th and 1st centuries before the Common Era. The walls of Daoson still stand today, constructed using Cyclopean masonry techniques similar to those found in Mycenaean Greece. Some of these limestone blocks weigh several tons, yet they were fitted together with remarkable precision. The Deorsi were sophisticated people who maintained trade relationships with Greek colonies along the coast. They minted their own bronze coins, created distinctive sculptures, and adopted elements of Hellenistic culture while maintaining their unique Illyrian identity. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed the extent of peaceful trade between Illyrians and their Mediterranean neighbors. In the border region between modern Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, excavations have uncovered an Illyrian trading post more than 2,000 years old at a site called Desilo. This settlement, positioned at the innermost point of a quiet bay where the Neretva River meets the sea, served as a crucial transfer point where goods moved between larger seagoing vessels and smaller riverboats. The discovery of this trading post challenges older narratives that portrayed Illyrians primarily as warriors and pirates. While it is true that coastal Illyrian tribes engaged in maritime raiding, which brought them into conflict with Greek traders and eventually with Rome, the archaeological record reveals a more nuanced picture. The Illyrians were also merchants, craftspeople, and farmers, their society far more complex than early historical accounts suggested. Illyrian religious life centered on nature, worship, and ancestor veneration. They practiced polytheism, honoring gods and goddesses associated with mountains, rivers, fertility, and warfare. Their burial customs were elaborate and varied by region. In northern Bosnia, cremation was common, with ashes placed in shallow graves. In Herzegovina and the southern regions, the dead were interred in massive stone or earth tumuli called gromile. Some of these burial mounds reached monumental proportions, more than 50 meters wide and 5 meters high, dominating the landscape. The care taken with these burials, the rich grave goods included, and the sheer scale of some burial monuments all speak to sophisticated beliefs about death and the afterlife. The Glasinac Plateau in eastern Bosnia contains hundreds of these burial mounds, creating an archaeological landscape of extraordinary richness. These tumuli held the remains of Illyrian elite, buried with weapons, jewelry, and precious objects that would accompany them to whatever realm lay beyond. Illyrian artisans excelled in metalwork, particularly bronze. They created elaborate fibulae, brooches used to fasten clothing, decorated with geometric patterns and spirals. Jewelry included heavy necklaces of colored glass paste, massive bronze bracelets, and delicate diadems of hammered bronze foil. Their warriors carried bronze greaves to protect their legs in battle, and iron weapons gradually replaced bronze implements as the Iron Age progressed. The Illyrian world could not remain isolated forever. To the south, Greek colonists had established cities along the Adriatic coast, including Epidamnus, known today as Durrës in Albania, and Apollonia. These Greek settlements became conduits for Mediterranean culture, and Illyrian tribes both traded with and raided these prosperous coastal cities. Greek historians, including Herodotus and Thucydides, mention the Illyrians in their writings, providing valuable, if sometimes biased, glimpses into Illyrian society. It was Illyrian piracy in the Adriatic Sea that first drew Rome's attention to this region. By the 3rd century before the Common Era, Rome was expanding its influence beyond the Italian peninsula. Illyrian raids threatened Roman trade routes, and in 229 before the Common Era, Rome launched the first of the Illyrian Wars. These conflicts would span decades, as various Illyrian tribes resisted Roman expansion with fierce determination. One of the most remarkable figures of this period was Queen Teuta of the Ardii tribe, who ruled in the 3rd century before the Common Era. Her naval forces conducted extensive raids throughout the Adriatic, challenging both Greek and Roman interests. Roman historians, scandalized that a woman would command armies and fleets, portrayed her as a symbol of barbarian lawlessness. Yet Teuta represented a tradition of powerful women in Illyrian society, suggesting that these cultures may have granted women more authority than many ancient civilizations. Despite fierce resistance, Rome's military might gradually overwhelmed the Illyrian kingdoms. The Daesitiates of central Bosnia proved particularly stubborn opponents. Their rebellion against Roman rule, which lasted from the year 6 to the year 9 of the Common Era, represented one of the most serious challenges Rome faced during this period. The Roman historian Velleius Paterculus described the Illyrian warriors as terrifying in appearance and speech, praising their fierce courage even as Rome worked to subdue them. By the year 9 of the Common Era, Rome had finally crushed the last major Illyrian rebellion. The entire region fell under Roman control, and the long process of Romanization began. The Romans divided their newly conquered territories into provinces. Northern Bosnia, along the southern bank of the Sava River, became part of the province of Pannonia. The rest of modern Bosnia and Herzegovina, along with much of the Adriatic coast, was incorporated into the province of Dalmatia. Roman engineers immediately began transforming the landscape. They constructed a network of roads connecting settlements and military posts, essential arteries for both military control and commerce. These roads followed mountain passes and river valleys, linking the Adriatic coast to the interior Balkans and beyond to the Danube frontier. Some stretches of these ancient roads can still be traced today, testimony to Roman engineering skill. The Romans were particularly interested in Bosnia's mineral wealth. Silver, lead, and gold deposits in eastern Bosnia attracted imperial attention. At Srebrenica, the Romans established extensive mining operations, extracting silver in such quantities that they called the settlement Argentum, meaning silver. These mines would continue producing for centuries, their wealth flowing back to Rome and later sustaining other empires that ruled this land. Roman towns emerged throughout Bosnia and Herzegovina. The modern town of Blagaj, situated where the Buna River emerges from a cliff face, was built atop the Roman settlement of Bona. Near the Sava River, several important towns served as administrative and commercial centers. These settlements followed typical Roman urban planning, with forums, temples, bathhouses, and amphitheaters bringing Mediterranean civilization to the Dinaric highlands. Christianity arrived early in Roman Bosnia. Bishops are mentioned in historical records as early as the 1st century of the Common Era in nearby Sirmium, and at least 20 Roman basilicas have been excavated within modern Bosnia's borders. These early Christian communities formed part of the Western Roman Church, a connection that would have profound implications for Bosnia's religious history in later centuries. Latin-speaking settlers from across the Roman Empire made new homes in these provinces. Roman veterans were encouraged to retire here, receiving land grants in exchange for their military service. Over generations, the Illyrian population gradually adopted Roman customs, Latin language, and Roman law. Yet this Romanization was never complete. In the mountains and more remote valleys, older ways persisted, and the Illyrian language continued to be spoken alongside Latin. The integration of Illyrians into the Roman military system proved remarkably successful. Illyrian soldiers, renowned for their toughness and martial skills, became valued components of Roman legions. Many rose to positions of significant authority. Indeed, several Roman emperors claimed Illyrian heritage, including Diocletian and Constantine the Great, two of the most important rulers in Roman history. Their rise from these Balkan provinces to the imperial throne itself demonstrates how thoroughly this region became integrated into the Roman world. For several centuries, Roman Bosnia enjoyed relative peace and prosperity. The archaeological record reveals thriving communities engaged in agriculture, mining, trade, and craft production. Villas dotted the countryside, some quite luxurious, while towns served as centers of administration and commerce. The Pax Romana, that long Roman peace, allowed culture and economy to flourish. Yet even mighty Rome could not hold back the tides of change forever. In the 3rd and 4th centuries of the Common Era, the Roman Empire faced increasing pressures, economic troubles, political instability, and barbarian invasions strained the imperial system. In 395, the empire formally split into eastern and western halves, with Dalmatia and Pannonia falling under the control of the Western Roman Empire. The collapse of Roman power in the west came gradually, then suddenly. Germanic tribes pushed southward and westward, seeking new lands and fleeing other pressures from the east. In 455, Ostrogoths conquered this region. Over subsequent decades, other peoples passed through, including the Huns and Alans, each wave of migration adding another layer to the region's complex ethnic history. In the 6th century, the Eastern Roman Empire, increasingly known as Byzantium, made efforts to reclaim these lost Western territories. Emperor Justinian launched ambitious campaigns to restore Roman control over former imperial lands. For a time, Bosnia and much of the Western Balkans fell under Byzantine authority, nominally at least part of the empire centered in Constantinople. But new peoples were on the move, migrations that would fundamentally reshape the Balkans. From the forests and plains of northeastern Europe came Slavic tribes spreading southward in waves. Allied with the Avars, a Turkic people from the steppes, these Slavs crossed the Danube in the 6th and 7th centuries. They settled throughout the Balkans, including the lands we now know as Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Slavic settlement marked a profound transformation. While the Illyrians had adapted to Roman rule and culture, maintaining elements of their identity, the Slavic migrations brought entirely new languages, customs, and ways of life. Over time, the older populations either assimilated with these newcomers or retreated to more remote areas. In some mountainous regions, Romance-speaking populations known as Vlachs maintained their pastoral lifestyle and Eastern Romance language related to Romanian, but even they would gradually blend into the emerging Slavic majority. As we pause here in our journey through time, we stand at a threshold. The ancient world of Illyrians and Romans has passed into memory, preserved now only in stone ruins, archaeological artifacts, and the written fragments left by Greek and Roman chroniclers. The land itself remains, these mountains and rivers that have witnessed so much. But new peoples now call this place home, and from their presence will emerge the medieval kingdoms and cultures that shape Bosnia and Herzegovina's identity to this day. Rest now, as history's currents swirl around these ancient mountains, preparing for the next chapter in this land's long story. Chapter 2: Medieval Kingdoms and Ottoman Arrival. The early medieval centuries brought profound changes to the lands we now call Bosnia and Herzegovina. As the Slavic peoples established themselves in these mountain valleys and karst plateaus, new political structures began to crystallize from the mists of the early Middle Ages. The story of medieval Bosnia is one of gradual emergence, of a people finding their own identity amidst the competing influences of powerful neighbors. The first written reference to Bosnia appears in the 10th century, penned by the Byzantine Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitus in his work De Administrando Imperio. This imperial chronicle mentions Bosnia as a small region, a territory defined more by geography than by clear political boundaries. Yet within these modest beginnings lay the seeds of a distinctive medieval kingdom that would rise to become, for a brief and glorious time, the most powerful state in the Western Balkans. For centuries, Bosnia existed as a borderland, claimed at various times by both the Kingdom of Hungary to the north and the Byzantine Empire to the south. Neither power could exercise effective control over these rugged mountains. The terrain itself proved Bosnia's greatest defender, its steep valleys and hidden passes making conquest difficult and governance nearly impossible for distant rulers. Into this power vacuum stepped local leaders, men who understood the land and commanded the loyalty of its people. The true founder of medieval Bosnia's political and economic stability was Ban Kulin, whose reign from 1180 to 1204 marks a golden age still remembered with nostalgia. Kulin ruled not as a king but as a ban, a title denoting a regional governor under nominal Hungarian authority. Yet, in practice, Kulin acted with near-complete independence, transforming Bosnia from a peripheral frontier region into a prosperous autonomous state. In 1189, Ban Kulin issued a charter that would prove momentous for Bosnia's future. This document, written in the Bosnian language using the distinctive Bosančica script, established a formal trade agreement with the Republic of Ragusa, known today as Dubrovnik. This coastal city-state was one of the Mediterranean's great commercial powers, and Kulin's charter granted Ragusan merchants special privileges to trade throughout Bosnia. In return, Bosnia gained access to Mediterranean markets and the wealth that flowed along those ancient trade routes. The Charter of Ban Kulin represents more than an economic treaty. It stands as one of the earliest written documents in the Bosnian language, a testament to an emerging cultural identity. Kulin referred to his subjects as Bošnjani, Bosnians, signaling a sense of collective identity that transcended tribal affiliations. Under his wise governance, Bosnia enjoyed peace and prosperity. Silver mines in the east produced wealth, craftsmen plied their trades in growing towns, and merchants traveled the rough roads connecting Bosnia to the wider world. Yet Kulin's reign was not without controversy, for it coincided with the emergence of the Bosnian Church, a religious institution that would profoundly shape the kingdom's history. After the Great Schism of 1054 divided Christianity into Catholic West and Orthodox East, most of Bosnia fell theoretically under the jurisdiction of Rome, but Bosnia's isolation from major Catholic centers, combined with poor theological training and limited contact with church authorities, led the Bosnian Church to develop its own distinctive character. Accusations of heresy soon followed. Neighboring rulers and foreign churchmen claimed that Bosnia harbored Bogomils, members of a dualist Christian sect that had originated in Bulgaria. The Bogomils rejected church hierarchy, refused to build churches, and held beliefs that both Rome and Constantinople deemed dangerously heretical. Whether the Bosnian church was truly Bogomil remains debated by historians to this day. Some scholars argue that the accusations were exaggerated, that the Bosnian church differed from Rome primarily in organization and practice rather than core theology. Others maintain that genuine dualist heresy took root in Bosnia's mountains. In 1203, facing threats of crusade and Hungarian invasion, Ban Kulin convened a council at Bilino Polje, a field near the modern city of Zenica. There, in the presence of a papal legate sent by Pope Innocent III, 7 priors of the Bosnian Church signed a declaration promising reforms and pledging loyalty to Rome. They agreed to build proper chapels, celebrate Mass according to Catholic rites, and reject heretical teachings. This abjuration temporarily saved Bosnia from crusade, but it did not eliminate the controversy surrounding the Bosnian Church. The Church continued to exist as a distinct institution, headed by a leader called the Dejade, meaning grandfather, and organized around small monasteries known as haije, or houses. Its adherents called themselves simply Christiani, Christians, and their missionaries wandered the countryside, some living in monasteries, others as traveling guests. The exact nature of their beliefs remains shrouded in mystery, as few documents from the church itself survive. We know them primarily through the hostile accounts of Catholic and Orthodox critics. After Kulin's death in 1204, Bosnia entered a period of instability. Hungarian kings repeatedly attempted to assert control, and internal conflicts weakened the realm. In 1252, Pope Innocent IV placed Bosnia's bishop under Hungarian jurisdiction, a decision that provoked the Bosnian Church to break decisively with Rome. This schism would last for more than 2 centuries, deepening Bosnia's religious distinctiveness and providing ongoing justification for foreign intervention. The 14th century brought revival under the Kotromanic dynasty. Ban Stephen II Kotromanic, who ruled from 1322 to 1353, expanded Bosnia's borders dramatically. Through shrewd diplomacy and strategic military campaigns, he incorporated the Principality of Hum to the south, the region that would later be known as Herzegovina. He extended Bosnian control to include parts of the Dalmatian coast, giving the landlocked kingdom precious access to the Adriatic Sea. He signed treaties with Ragusa and Venice, ensuring peaceful trade relations with Bosnia's most important commercial partners. When Stephen Kotromanic died in 1353, he bequeathed to his nephew, Tvrtko, a state that was independent, prosperous, and powerful. But young Tvrtko was only 15 years old, and the great noble families who controlled different regions of Bosnia did not easily accept his authority. Tvrtko's early years were marked by civil strife, as powerful magnates challenged his rule. Only through patience, political skill, and eventual military success did he gradually consolidate power. By 1370, Tvrtko had established firm control over Bosnia. He then embarked on an ambitious program of expansion that would make his reign legendary. To the south, he expanded deep into Serbian territory, taking advantage of the chaos following the collapse of the Serbian Empire after the Battle of Kosovo in 1389. To the west, he seized control of the entire Dalmatian coast, including numerous islands, though the independent city-state of Ragusa managed to preserve its freedom. On the 26th of October, 1377, in the Church of St. Nicholas in the valley of Visoko near modern Sarajevo, Tvrtko was crowned king. He took the title King of Serbia, Bosnia, and the coast, later adding King of Dalmatia and Croatia to his list of realms. This coronation transformed the Banate of Bosnia into the Kingdom of Bosnia, elevating its status among the nations of Europe. The ceremony was performed with Serbian regalia before the relics of Saint Sava, legitimizing Tvrtko's claim to Serbian lands following the extinction of the Nemanjić dynasty. At its height in the late 1380s, Tvrtko's Bosnia was indeed the most powerful state in the Western Balkans. His kingdom stretched from the Adriatic coast deep into the interior, controlling crucial trade routes and rich silver mines. Bosnia minted its own coins bearing the royal coat of arms, golden lilies on a blue field. The kingdom fielded formidable armies and maintained diplomatic relations with Venice, Hungary, and other powers. Yet this greatness depended heavily on Tvrtko's personal authority and the cooperation of powerful noble families. After Tvrtko's death in 1391, the kingdom entered a long decline. His successors lacked his political acumen and military prowess. The great magnates reasserted their independence, and the institution known as the Stanak, an assembly of nobles, gained power at the expense of royal authority. This Council of Lords met to elect kings, make treaties, and decide matters of war and peace, but its dominance illustrated the weakness of central government and the feudal fragmentation of the realm. Throughout the 15th century, Bosnia faced mounting pressures from all sides. Hungary sought to reassert control from the north. The expanding Ottoman Empire, having already conquered much of the Balkans, pressed northward with inexorable force. Internal religious conflicts continued as Franciscan missionaries, who had established a network of monasteries in Bosnia during the 14th century, worked to convert the Bosnian Church to Catholic Orthodoxy. In 1459, King Stephen Thomas ordered the clergy of the Bosnian Church either to convert to Catholicism or leave the kingdom. Most converted, and the distinctive Bosnian Church, already weakened by decades of pressure, effectively ceased to exist. The end came swiftly in 1463. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, turned his formidable military machine toward Bosnia. The Bosnian king, Stephen Tomašević, was young and inexperienced, unable to mount effective resistance. Within months, Ottoman armies swept through the kingdom. The fortress of Bobovac, seat of Bosnian kings, fell. The northern stronghold of Jadje was besieged. By autumn, most of Bosnia lay under Ottoman control, though King Matthias of Hungary managed to retain a northern strip that held out for several more decades until 527. The Ottoman conquest marked the beginning of more than 4 centuries of Islamic rule that would fundamentally transform Bosnia's cultural and religious landscape. The Ottomans organized their new territories into provinces called eyalets, subdivided into sanjaks, which were further divided into kazas, administered by local judges called kadis. Sarajevo emerged as an important administrative center, a city that would grow into one of the great urban centers of Ottoman Europe. The Ottoman system was based on Islamic law, but incorporated significant pragmatism. Non-Muslims were organized into millets, religious communities allowed to govern their internal affairs according to their own laws and customs. Christians and Jews could practice their faiths, maintain their places of worship, and be judged in civil matters by their own religious authorities. They paid special taxes, including the jizya levied on non-Muslims, but they were not, as is sometimes believed, forcibly converted to Islam at sword point. Instead, conversion to Islam in Bosnia was a gradual process, spanning more than a century. Multiple factors encouraged this transformation. Muslims enjoyed significant advantages under Ottoman rule, including exemption from certain taxes, eligibility for positions in the government and military, and superior legal status in courts. Land ownership laws favored Muslims, allowing them to turn holdings into freehold farms, while Christian peasants often remained in serf-like conditions. In towns and cities where Ottoman administration and Islamic culture flourished, conversion proceeded most rapidly among merchants, craftsmen, and ambitious young men seeking careers in state service. Bosnia's religious landscape before the conquest also facilitated conversion. Multiple Christian denominations competed for followers. Catholics concentrated in the west, Orthodox growing in strength in the east and north, and the remnants of the Bosnian church scattered throughout. No single church commanded strong loyalty from the entire population. Some historians argue that members of the Bosnian church, having been persecuted by both Rome and Constantinople, found Ottoman religious tolerance preferable to Christian intolerance. By the 17th century, Muslims had become the majority population in Bosnia, a unique situation in Ottoman Europe. The centuries of Ottoman rule left an indelible mark on Bosnia. Islamic architecture transformed the landscape, with elegant mosques rising in town squares, bridges spanning rivers in graceful stone arches, and caravanserais offering rest to travelers on dusty roads. The old bridge at Mostar, completed in 1566, became an enduring symbol of Ottoman engineering and artistic achievement. Sarajevo developed into a cosmopolitan city where Muslims, Orthodox Christians, Catholics, and Sephardic Jews, who had fled persecution in Spain and found refuge in Ottoman lands, lived in relative harmony within their respective quarters. Yet Ottoman power was not eternal. By the late 17th century, the empire had passed its zenith and entered a long, slow decline. Austrian and Russian armies began pushing back Ottoman frontiers. The Great Siege of Vienna in 1683 ended in Ottoman defeat, and from that point forward, the sultans found themselves increasingly on the defensive. As Ottoman strength waned, European powers grew bolder in their ambitions regarding the empire's European territories. In 1878, following yet another Russo-Turkish war, the Congress of Berlin gathered to redraw the map of southeastern Europe. The great powers, seeking to prevent Russian dominance in the Balkans, allowed Austro-Hungary to occupy and administer Bosnia and Herzegovina, though technically the territories remained under Ottoman sovereignty. This temporary occupation would last 30 years before Austro-Hungary formally annexed the provinces in 1908, an act that contributed to the tensions leading to the Great War. As we pause at this threshold in 1878, Bosnia stands at the crossroads of civilizations. 4 centuries of Ottoman rule have created a unique society where Islam and Christianity coexist, where East and West meet and mingle in the marketplaces and mountain villages. The next chapter will bring new rulers, new conflicts, and the slow, painful emergence of modern national identities that will shape Bosnia's tumultuous 20th century. But that is a story for another night, as history's currents continue to flow through these ancient mountains. Chapter 3: Austro-Hungarian period and Yugoslav formation. The autumn of 1878 brought new rulers to Bosnia and Herzegovina. After 4 centuries under the Ottoman sultans, the provinces now fell under the administration of Austria-Hungary, one of Europe's great empires. Yet this transition was not welcomed with open arms. Both Bosnian Muslims, fearing the loss of their majority status and privileges, and Bosnian Serbs, dreaming of union with the independent Kingdom of Serbia, resisted the Austrian occupation. The initial military campaign to secure control proved difficult. Austrian troops encountered fierce resistance as they marched through mountain passes and towns, but imperial power eventually prevailed, and by autumn's end, the provinces were firmly under Austrian-Hungarian administration. Though nominally the territories remained Ottoman possessions, in all practical matters Vienna now governed Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Austro-Hungarian authorities approached their new territories with ambition and energy. They brought modernization on a scale Bosnia had never witnessed. Engineers surveyed routes for railways that would link Sarajevo to Vienna and the wider empire. The narrow-gauge lines they constructed climbed through mountain passes and followed river valleys, opening isolated regions to commerce and communication. By the time of the Great War, Bosnia possessed over 1,000 kilometers of railway track. New schools rose in cities and towns, teaching in German, Croatian, Serbian, and Bosnian languages. The authorities established modern administrative structures, trained civil servants, and created a professional bureaucracy. They surveyed mineral deposits, invested in mining operations, and developed forestry resources. Sarajevo transformed from a provincial Ottoman town into a bustling Central European city, with broad boulevards, modern buildings, and gas lighting that pushed back the night. To populate and develop the provinces, Austria-Hungary encouraged immigration from across the empire. Germans, Czechs, Slovaks, Hungarians, Poles, Ukrainians, Croats, Slovenes, and Italians arrived to serve as craftsmen, farmers, officials, and settlers. Historians estimate that during the Austro-Hungarian period, approximately 95,000 Catholics, 18,000 Eastern Orthodox Christians, and 20,000 members of other religious groups immigrated to Bosnia and Herzegovina. These settlers brought new skills, technologies, and perspectives, serving as agents of modernization in a society still deeply traditional. Yet modernization came with costs and tensions. Austria-Hungary's constitutional structure created peculiar complications. The provinces were administered by the joint Austro-Hungarian finance ministry rather than being incorporated into either the Austrian or Hungarian halves of the dual monarchy. This arrangement reflected Vienna and Budapest's inability to agree on how to partition the new territories between themselves, but it left Bosnia in constitutional limbo, neither fully autonomous nor clearly integrated into the empire's structures. The religious and ethnic diversity that had characterized Bosnia for centuries now became politically charged. 3 main communities emerged with increasingly distinct identities and competing visions for Bosnia's future. The Orthodox Serbs, comprising roughly 40% of the population, looked to the Kingdom of Serbia and dreamed of South Slavic unity under Serbian leadership. The Catholics, about 20% of the population, tended to identify as Croats and felt cultural affinity with the Croatian lands within the empire. The Muslims, roughly 30%, found themselves in an uncertain position. Their privileges and status diminished under Christian rule, yet gradually adapting to the new realities. Political parties formed along ethnic and religious lines. The Serb national organization sought cultural autonomy and connections with Serbia. The Croatian People's Union advocated for Bosnia's integration with other Croatian lands within the empire. The Yugoslav Muslim organization worked to protect Muslim interests, particularly regarding land ownership and religious autonomy. These parties engaged in complex coalitions and rivalries, their maneuvers reflecting deeper questions about identity and belonging that would haunt Bosnia throughout the 20th century. Austria-Hungary's efforts to modernize the Islamic community in Bosnia represented one of the more unusual aspects of their administration. The authorities established formal structures for Muslim religious life, creating an official hierarchy and educational system. They founded Sharia courts with defined jurisdictions and supported Islamic schools and institutions. This institutionalization of Islam within a European imperial framework created precedents that would influence Bosnian Muslim identity for generations. In 1908, international circumstances converged to prompt Austria-Hungary to take a decisive step. The Young Turk Revolution in Constantinople threatened to restore constitutional government to the Ottoman Empire and potentially reawaken Ottoman claims over Bosnia. Austrian Foreign Minister Alois Aehrenthal decided the moment had come to formally annex the provinces, ending even the nominal Ottoman sovereignty that had persisted for 30 years. On October 5, 1908, Emperor Franz Joseph announced the annexation. 2 days later, proclamations in Sarajevo informed the population that Bosnia and Herzegovina now belonged fully to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This unilateral action sparked an international crisis. The Ottoman Empire protested vigorously. The Kingdom of Serbia mobilized its army, demanding territorial compensation or even the reversal of the annexation. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic peoples, supported Serbian claims and called for an international conference. For months, Europe teetered on the brink of war, but Austria-Hungary had secured German support, and when Berlin made clear it would stand with Vienna, Russia backed down, unwilling to risk a general European conflict. By April 1909, the crisis had passed. The Ottoman Empire received financial compensation and accepted the annexation. Serbia, under pressure, recognized Austria-Hungary's sovereignty over Bosnia. Montenegro followed suit. The immediate danger had passed, but the crisis left deep wounds and bitter resentments. In Serbia and among Bosnian Serbs, the annexation crisis intensified nationalist fervor. Secret societies formed, dedicated to liberating South Slavs from foreign rule and uniting them in a greater Serbia or a unified Yugoslavia. One such organization, founded in Belgrade in 1911, called itself Unification or Death, though it would become notorious by another name, the Black Hand. Its members included army officers, government officials, and radical nationalists who believed that violence was justified in pursuit of South Slavic liberation. A parallel movement called Young Bosnia emerged among students and intellectuals in the occupied provinces. These young Bosnians, predominantly but not exclusively Serbs, embraced revolutionary ideologies and dreamed of throwing off imperial rule. They read forbidden texts, held secret meetings, and spoke passionately of freedom and sacrifice. The movement's ideology blended Serbian nationalism with broader Yugoslavist ideas, romantic notions of revolutionary heroism with genuine grievances against Austrian authority. In the spring of 1914, word spread through these circles that Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, would visit Sarajevo in June to observe military exercises. To the conspirators of young Bosnia, this represented an opportunity that could not be missed. Franz Ferdinand was known to favor a reorganization of the empire that would grant greater autonomy to Slavic peoples, creating a third Slavic crown alongside the Austrian and Hungarian crowns. Paradoxically, this made him a target, for Serbian nationalists saw such reforms as a threat that might satisfy South Slavs enough to forestall unification with Serbia. A 19-year-old Bosnian Serb student named Gavrilo Princip, together with several companions, traveled to Belgrade seeking weapons. The Black Hand provided 6 handheld bombs, 4 semi-automatic pistols, and cyanide capsules for suicide after the attack. In late May, the young assassins crossed back into Bosnia, weapons hidden on their persons, determination burning in their hearts. On the morning of Sunday, June the 28th, 1914, the Archduke and his wife Sophie arrived in Sarajevo by train. The date held symbolic significance. It was Vidovdan, Saint Vitus's Day, commemorating the Serbian defeat at the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, a date sacred in Serbian nationalist mythology. Security was surprisingly lax, perhaps because Sarajevo was not considered particularly dangerous, or perhaps because arrangements had been poorly coordinated. 6 assassins positioned themselves along the motorcade route as the Archduke's car traveled through the city. The first conspirator failed to act. The second threw a bomb that bounced off the Archduke's car and exploded behind them, injuring several people in the following vehicle but leaving Franz Ferdinand and Sophie unharmed. The motorcade sped away to the town hall, passing the remaining conspirators too quickly for them to act. After official speeches at the town hall, the Archduke insisted on visiting those wounded in the bombing, but in the confusion, no one informed his driver of the route change. The chauffeur took a wrong turn, stopped to reverse, and found himself stalled on a street corner. There, by chance or fate, sat Gavrilo Princip in a nearby cafe. Seizing the unexpected opportunity, Princip stepped forward and fired 2 shots at point-blank range. Both the Archduke and his wife were struck. Within minutes, both had died. The assassinations sent shockwaves through Europe. In Vienna, Austrian authorities saw the hand of Serbia behind the plot, though investigations would reveal no direct government involvement. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, worded in terms designed to be rejected. When Serbia's response proved unsatisfactory, Austria-Hungary declared war on July the 28th, exactly 1 month after the assassination. Within days, the alliance systems that bound Europe's great powers drew nation after nation into conflict. By early August, the Great War had begun. For Bosnia, the war years brought hardship and suffering. Men were conscripted into Austro-Hungarian armies and sent to fight on distant fronts in Galicia, Italy, and the Balkans. The wartime economy imposed privations on civilians. Food grew scarce, trade disrupted, normal life suspended. Serbs in Bosnia faced particular suspicion and persecution, accused of disloyalty and sympathy with enemy Serbia. Thousands were interned, and acts of revenge marred these difficult years. By 1918, After 4 years of slaughter that claimed millions of lives, Austria-Hungary's defeat was complete. The empire that had ruled for centuries dissolved, fragmenting into successor states. In October 1918, as imperial authority collapsed, South Slavic politicians in Zagreb declared the formation of a state of Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs, encompassing the South Slavic territories that had been part of Austria-Hungary, including Croatia, Slovenia, Dalmatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. This new state proved short-lived and unstable, unable to establish effective control or gain international recognition. Fearing Italian territorial ambitions and seeking protection, its leaders negotiated union with the Kingdom of Serbia. On December 1st, 1918, in Belgrade, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes was proclaimed. Bosnia and Herzegovina, after centuries under different empires, now joined a South Slavic state ruled by the Serbian Karađorđević dynasty. The new kingdom faced enormous challenges from its inception. The territories it united had vastly different historical experiences, administrative traditions, legal systems, and economic development levels. Serbia had suffered terribly during the war, losing over 1 million dead, yet emerged as the dominant partner in the new state. Tensions immediately emerged between Serbian centralism and Croatian regionalism, between those who embraced a unified Yugoslav identity and those who clung to separate Serbian, Croatian, and Slovenian national consciousness. For Bosnia, the transition brought particular difficulties. The agrarian reform of 1918 to 1919 confiscated large estates, primarily from Muslim landowners, and redistributed land to peasants, many of them Serb settlers brought in from other regions. This mass colonization and property confiscation created lasting resentment and economic disruption. The traditional administrative divisions based on Ottoman sanjaks were replaced by new boundaries deliberately drawn to fragment Bosnia and erase its historical identity. Political life in interwar Bosnia revolved around parties that, as before, organized primarily along ethnic and religious lines. The Yugoslav Muslim organization, led by Mehmed Spaho, worked to protect Muslim interests and preserve some recognition of Bosnia's distinctiveness within the kingdom. Croatian and Serbian parties competed for influence, their rivalries reflecting the broader tensions tearing at Yugoslavia's foundations. In 1929, after years of parliamentary deadlock and ethnic tensions, King Alexander declared a royal dictatorship. He dissolved parliament, banned political parties, organized on ethnic lines, and renamed the country the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. He divided the realm into 9 Banovinas, administrative provinces deliberately designed to cut across historical and ethnic boundaries. Bosnia and Herzegovina disappeared as a distinct entity, parceled out among several Banovinas. The king hoped these measures would forge a unified Yugoslav identity, but they instead deepened resentments. King Alexander's assassination in Marseille in 1934 by Croatian and Macedonian nationalists, supported by Italy and Hungary, demonstrated the violent passions his policies had failed to suppress. His successor, the young King Peter, ruled through a regency that struggled to hold the kingdom together. By the late 1930s, with Nazi Germany rising and threatening all of Europe, Yugoslav politicians attempted various compromises to ease internal tensions. The 1939 Cvetković-Maček Agreement created an autonomous Croatian Banovina, essentially partitioning Bosnia between Croatian and Serbian spheres of influence. But before these arrangements could stabilize, history intervened catastrophically. In April 1941, Nazi Germany, along with Italy, Hungary, and Bulgaria, invaded Yugoslavia. Within days, the kingdom had collapsed, its armies defeated, its government fleeing into exile. The occupation brought horrors beyond measure to Bosnia. The Axis powers dismembered Yugoslavia, and Bosnia was incorporated into the independent state of Croatia, a Nazi puppet state ruled by the Ustaša, a fascist Croatian nationalist movement. Under Ustaše rule, Bosnia witnessed genocide and mass murder on a staggering scale. The Jewish population faced systematic extermination. Hundreds of thousands of Serbs died in concentration camps or in massacres carried out by Ustaš militias. Forced conversions, ethnic cleansing, and terror became instruments of state policy. Resistance movements arose amid this nightmare. Serbian Chetniks, royalist nationalists loyal to the exiled government, fought against the Ustaš but also pursued their own agenda of creating an ethnically pure Greater Serbia, committing atrocities against Muslim and Croatian civilians. Muslim populations faced violence from multiple sides, caught between Ustaša, Chetnik, and partisan forces. The most effective resistance came from the partisans, communist guerrillas led by Josip Broz Tito. Unlike the Chetniks, who represented Serbian nationalism, Tito's partisans embraced a multi-ethnic vision, recruiting Serbs, Croats, Muslims, and others into their ranks. They promised a Yugoslavia based on brotherhood and unity, where ethnic divisions would give way to socialist solidarity. Through years of brutal fighting, the partisans gradually gained strength, eventually receiving Allied recognition and support. On November the 25th, 1943, in the Bosnian town of Jadje, the Anti-Fascist Council for the National Liberation of Yugoslavia convened a historic session. There, the partisans laid the foundation for a new Yugoslavia, one organized as a federation of equal republics. Bosnia and Herzegovina would be one of 6 republics, alongside Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Macedonia, and Montenegro. This decision recognized Bosnia's historical distinctiveness and multi-ethnic character, offering hope that the new Yugoslavia might succeed where the kingdom had failed. By May 1945, as Nazi Germany collapsed, the partisans emerged victorious in Yugoslavia. Tito's forces had liberated their country through their own efforts, giving the new communist regime a legitimacy and independence unusual in Eastern Europe. Bosnia and Herzegovina, devastated by years of warfare and atrocities, now faced the challenge of rebuilding under socialist rule. As we pause at this threshold of 1945, Bosnia stands exhausted, scarred, its people traumatized by horrors that left deep wounds across communities. Yet within the ruins, a new order was taking shape, one that would attempt to transcend ethnic divisions through communist ideology and Yugoslav unity. Whether this attempt would succeed, whether the wounds could heal, whether Bosnia could find peace within a socialist federation, remained to be seen as history entered a new chapter. Chapter 4: Socialist Yugoslavia and Road to Independence. From the ashes of war, Josip Broz Tito built a new Yugoslavia. The man who would dominate Yugoslav politics for 35 years had emerged from the partisan struggle with unmatched prestige as the liberator of the nation. In November 1945, Elections gave his communist-led People's Front an overwhelming victory, though the vote was hardly free or fair by Western standards. The monarchy was formally abolished, King Peter II deposed and exiled, and on November the 29th, 1945, the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia was proclaimed. This second Yugoslavia differed fundamentally from the failed kingdom that preceded it. Where the monarchy had been centralized under Serbian dominance, breeding resentment among other nationalities, the new federation recognized 6 equal republics: Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Additionally, 2 autonomous provinces were established within Serbia itself: Vojvodina, with its Hungarian minority, and Kosovo, where Albanians formed the majority population. For Bosnia, this federal structure represented recognition of its historical distinctiveness and multi-ethnic character. The republic's borders were drawn to encompass the traditional territories that had formed Bosnia and Herzegovina under Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian rule. Within the new socialist system, Bosnian Muslims gained official acknowledgement as a distinct community, though their precise status, whether religious or national, remained somewhat ambiguous in those early years. Bosnia held a special place in Tito's vision, often called Little Yugoslavia, because its ethnic diversity mirrored the federation itself. Tito's Yugoslavia embraced a powerful ideology expressed in the slogan "Brotherhood and Unity." This concept had dual meanings, carefully crafted to serve the regime's purposes. It referred to mutual tolerance and cooperation among Yugoslavia's diverse ethnic groups: Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Macedonians, Montenegrins, and Muslims. The horrors of World War II, when ethnic hatreds had led to genocide and civil war, made this message of unity especially resonant. Never again, the slogan implied, would Yugoslavs allow ethnic divisions to tear the nation apart. But brotherhood and unity also signified the unity of the Communist Party itself, the League of Communists of Yugoslavia, which brooked no dissent or alternative power centers. The party maintained absolute control over all aspects of life: political, economic, cultural, and social. Political commissars stood alongside military commanders, ensuring ideological conformity. The media was controlled, opposition suppressed, and those who challenged the system faced imprisonment or worse. Tito himself, while personally charismatic and popular, ruled with an iron hand when necessary. The immediate post-war years focused on rebuilding a country devastated by warfare. Yugoslavia had suffered catastrophic losses, cities destroyed, infrastructure ruined, economy shattered. Tito mobilized the population, especially young people, into work brigades that reconstructed roads, bridges, factories, and railways. A 5-year plan launched in 1947, modeled on Soviet planning, emphasized heavy industry and arms production. Arms factories opened throughout Bosnia and Serbia, as Tito sought to make Yugoslavia self-sufficient in weaponry. In 1948, a dramatic rupture shook the communist world. Joseph Stalin, expecting Yugoslavia to be a compliant satellite like other Eastern European states, grew furious when Tito pursued independent policies regarding Albania and Greece. Stalin expelled Yugoslavia from the Cominform, the organization coordinating communist parties. For the first time, a communist leader in power had defied Soviet hegemony. This Tito-Stalin split transformed Yugoslavia's international position and domestic development. Cut off from Soviet support yet unwilling to submit to Western capitalism, Yugoslavia charted its own path. In 1950, Tito introduced a distinctive economic model called workers' self-management. Factories and enterprises were managed by workers' councils, with employees participating in decision-making and sharing profits. This system, neither Soviet-style central planning nor Western free markets, became Yugoslavia's signature contribution to socialist economic theory. By 1963, when the country officially became the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, this middle way had brought impressive results. Industrial production had increased five-fold since the war, and living standards were rising steadily. In foreign policy, Yugoslavia helped pioneer the non-aligned movement, joining with newly independent nations in Asia and Africa to chart a course independent of both Cold War blocs. Tito became an international statesman, hosting conferences, traveling widely, and positioning Yugoslavia as a bridge between East and West. This international prestige, combined with economic development and relative political stability, made 1960s and 70s Yugoslavia something of a success story. The country hosted the 1984 Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, showcasing to the world a prosperous, modern nation where diverse ethnicities lived together harmoniously. Yet beneath this surface unity, tensions simmered. Brotherhood and unity was imposed from above through party control rather than growing organically from below. National and religious identities persisted, despite official ideology promoting Yugoslav unity over ethnic particularism. The Croatian Spring movement of the early 1970s demonstrated that nationalist sentiments had not disappeared. Croatian intellectuals and students demanded greater autonomy and recognition of Croatian national rights. Tito crushed the movement, arresting leaders and reasserting central control. But the episode revealed fault lines that socialist ideology could not fully bridge. Economic disparities also created resentments. Slovenia and Croatia, the northern republics with Austrian historical influences, were more developed and prosperous. Bosnia, Macedonia, Montenegro, and the autonomous province of Kosovo remained poorer, more agricultural, less industrialized. Tito's blood transfusion policy attempted to address these inequalities by transferring resources from richer to poorer regions, but the development gap persisted. Kosovo's per capita income was $800 compared to Slovenia's $5,000, a disparity that fueled ethnic tensions alongside nationalist grievances. In 1974, Tito promulgated a new constitution designed to prevent any single republic from dominating the federation. It gave greater powers to the republics and autonomous provinces, creating an elaborate system of rotating leadership and collective decision-making. This decentralization weakened central authority, but was intended to ensure all groups felt represented. The constitution made Yugoslavia a complex patchwork of overlapping jurisdictions, nationalist ambitions, carefully balanced through institutional arrangements. On May 4th, 1980, Josip Broz Tito died at age 87. Throughout Yugoslavia, people wept openly. Their tears mixed mourning with fear, for everyone understood that Tito's personal authority had held the federation together. The collective presidency he had designed, with leadership rotating among republic representatives, lacked his unifying presence. Yugoslavia entered the 1980s facing mounting economic problems. Foreign debt accumulated, inflation rose, unemployment grew, and living standards stagnated. Into this vacuum stepped Slobodan Milosevic, a Serbian Communist Party official who recognized that nationalism could be harnessed for political power. In 1987, sent to Kosovo to address complaints from the Serb minority about mistreatment by the Albanian majority, Milosevic made a fateful choice. Rather than urging calm and compromise, he inflamed Serbian nationalist passions, declaring that Serbs would never again be beaten down. This populist performance launched his rise to dominance in Serbian politics. Through 1988 and 1989, Milosevic consolidated power using mass rallies and nationalist rhetoric to push aside rivals. He secured control over Serbia's autonomous provinces, Kosovo and Vojvodina, and gained influence in Montenegro, where Tito had suppressed nationalism in service of brotherhood and unity. Milosevic weaponized it. In June 1989, on the 600th anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo Polje, where medieval Serbia fell to Ottoman forces, Milosevic delivered a speech to hundreds of thousands that essentially called for a greater Serbia. Slovenian and Croatian leaders watched with alarm as Milosevic transformed Yugoslavia's delicate federal balance into Serbian domination. In January 1990, at the League of Communists Congress in Belgrade, Slovenian delegates walked out when Milosevic's faction rejected demands for greater republican autonomy. Croatian delegates followed, then Bosnian, Montenegrin, and Vojvodina representatives. The Communist Party of Yugoslavia dissolved along republic lines, fragmenting into separate parties. The ideological glue that held Yugoslavia together was coming unstuck. That same year, 1990, Yugoslavia held its first multi-party elections. In Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, and Macedonia, ethnic separatist parties triumphed over the Socialists. Only in Serbia and Montenegro did Milosevic and his allies retain power. Nationalist rhetoric intensified dramatically on all sides. Slovenia declared sovereignty, asserting that Slovenian law took precedence over federal law. Croatia followed suit. Bosnia and Herzegovina declared its sovereignty in October. The federal state was unraveling. Slovenia and Croatia attempted to transform Yugoslavia into a loose confederation of sovereign states, but Serbia rejected this approach. International attention focused elsewhere on German reunification, Soviet collapse, and the Gulf War crisis. Yugoslavia had lost its Cold War strategic importance. When Slovenia and Croatia declared independence on June 25, 1991, the Yugoslav People's Army briefly intervened in Slovenia, but withdrew after 10 days. In Croatia, however, the Serb minority, concentrated in certain regions, rebelled against Croatian independence. With support from the Serbian-dominated army, Croatian Serbs declared independence and ignited a brutal war. For Bosnia and Herzegovina, the situation was exceptionally perilous. The republic's ethnic composition made it Yugoslavia in miniature, approximately 43% Bosnian Muslim, 33% Serb, 17% Croat, and 7% others. These communities were not neatly separated but intermixed, living in the same towns and cities, sharing neighborhoods and workplaces. What would happen to Bosnia if Yugoslavia dissolved? Three incompatible visions emerged. Bosnian Muslims, led by Alija Izetbegovic of the Party of Democratic Action, wanted an independent, multi-ethnic Bosnia where all communities would be equal citizens. Bosnian Serbs, led by Radovan Karadzic and his Serbian Democratic Party, wanted Bosnia to remain in Yugoslavia or, failing that, to separate Serb-majority areas and join them to Serbia. Bosnian Croats desired either an autonomous Croatian entity within Bosnia or outright annexation to Croatia. These visions could not be reconciled. International mediators attempted to broker compromises. In February 1992, talks in Lisbon proposed dividing Bosnia into 3 ethnic constituent units. Initially, all sides agreed, but after meeting with American Ambassador Warren Zimmerman, Izetbegovic withdrew his support, believing perhaps that international recognition of an undivided Bosnia was possible. This decision, well-intentioned but fateful, removed the last chance for peaceful resolution. On February the 29th and March the 1st, 1992, Bosnia held a referendum on independence. Bosnian Serbs, following Karadzic's guidance, boycotted the vote. Of those who participated, representing about 64% of the population, 98% voted for independence. On March the 3rd, 1992, President Izetbegovic proclaimed Bosnia and Herzegovina's independence. The European Community and United States granted recognition on April the 6th. That same day, April the 6th, 1992, Bosnian Serb forces began the bombardment of Sarajevo. The siege of this cosmopolitan city, which had hosted the Olympics just 8 years earlier, would last nearly 4 years, becoming the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare. Bosnian Serb forces, armed with weapons left behind by the Yugoslav army and supported by Serbia, launched offensives throughout the republic. Their goal was to capture as much territory as possible and establish a Serb republic, Republika Srpska, that would either be independent or join Serbia. The Bosnian War had begun. The conflict that would rage until November 1995 would claim over 100,000 lives, create 2 million refugees, and include atrocities that shocked the world. Ethnic cleansing became systematic policy, with all sides committing crimes but Bosnian Serb forces responsible for the majority. Detention camps recalled the horrors of World War II. Systematic rape was used as a weapon of war. Ancient cities were shelled, cultural heritage destroyed, and neighbors who had lived peacefully for decades turned against one another. As we pause here at the threshold of war in April 1992, we leave Bosnia at perhaps its darkest hour. The promise of brotherhood and unity had failed. The dream of a multi-ethnic society living in peace had shattered. Yet even in these terrible times, there were those who resisted ethnic hatred, who helped neighbors regardless of ethnicity, who insisted on maintaining their humanity amid horror. Their stories, and the long path toward peace that lay ahead, will be the subject of our next chapter, as we turn to examine the war itself and Bosnia's difficult journey toward recovery and reconciliation. Chapter 5: The Bosnian War and Modern Era. The final decade of the 20th century would bring Bosnia and Herzegovina through its darkest hours and into a new, uncertain age. As Yugoslavia dissolved around them, the people of this diverse land found themselves caught in a conflict that would shock the world and leave scars that remain visible today. By 1991, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was coming apart at the seams. Slovenia and Croatia had declared their independence, sparking armed conflicts that would soon spread southward. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the situation was particularly complex. The republic's population was a mosaic of three main groups: 44% identified as Bosniak Muslims, 31% as Serbs, and 17% as Croats. For decades, these communities had lived side by side in the same towns and cities, their identities distinct yet intertwined. As the Yugoslav state crumbled, Bosnia's leaders faced an impossible choice. On February 29th and March 1st, 1992, the Republic held a referendum on independence. The result was overwhelming, with 99.7% voting in favor. But this democratic expression masked a deeper division. Most Bosnian Serbs boycotted the vote entirely, having made clear their desire to remain within Yugoslavia or unite with Serbia. The international community recognized Bosnia and Herzegovina's independence in early April 1992, but recognition on paper could not prevent the violence that was about to engulf the country. On April 5th, as news spread of international recognition, thousands gathered in Sarajevo to demonstrate for peace and unity. A shot rang out from the Holiday Inn, killing 2 protesters. The Bosnian War had begun. The conflict that followed would become one of the most brutal in European history since the Second World War. The Yugoslav People's Army, dominated by Serb officers, withdrew from Bosnia only to transfer its weapons and personnel to newly formed Bosnian Serb forces. These forces, organized into the Army of Republika Srpska under General Ratko Mladic, quickly seized control of roughly 70% of Bosnian territory. Their goal was to create an ethnically homogeneous Serb state that would eventually unite with Serbia. Sarajevo, the cosmopolitan capital that had once hosted the Winter Olympics, became a city under siege. From April 1992, Bosnian Serb forces surrounded the city and subjected it to constant artillery bombardment and sniper fire. The siege would last 43 months, making it the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare. Civilians going about their daily lives, fetching water or crossing streets, became targets. Over 13,000 people would die during the siege, including more than 5,000 civilians. Across Bosnia, the war took on a particularly terrible character. This was not merely a conflict between armies. It was a systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing, designed to create ethnically pure territories through terror and violence. Villages were surrounded and shelled. Civilians were forced from their homes at gunpoint. Concentration camps emerged where prisoners faced starvation, torture, and execution. The world watched in horror as images from camps like Omarska and Trinopolje revealed the depths of human cruelty. The Bosnian Croat forces, organized as the Croatian Defense Council, initially fought alongside Bosniak forces against the Serb offensive, but by January 1993, this fragile alliance collapsed into open warfare between Croats and Bosniaks. For over a year, Bosnia was torn by a three-way conflict, each side pursuing its own territorial ambitions. Only in March 1994, with American mediation, did Croats and Bosniaks agree to form a federation and once again unite against Serb forces. The United Nations responded to the crisis by establishing so-called safe areas, towns theoretically under international protection, where civilians could seek refuge. Srebrenica, a town in eastern Bosnia that had swelled with refugees fleeing the violence, was declared such a safe area in April 1993. A small contingent of Dutch peacekeepers was stationed there to enforce this protection, but the safe area designation would prove tragically meaningless. By July 1995, conditions in Srebrenica had become desperate. Food and medicine were scarce. On July 6th, Bosnian Serb forces under General Mladic's command launched an assault on the enclave. Despite pleas for NATO air support, the Dutch peacekeepers were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. On July 11th, Serb forces entered the town. What followed was genocide. Over the next several days, Bosnian Serb forces systematically separated men and boys from women, children, and the elderly. While women were forcibly deported, the men and boys were detained and executed in what can only be described as an organized killing operation. More than 8,000 Bosniak males were murdered and buried in mass graves around Srebrenica. Many who tried to flee through the forests were hunted down and killed. The bodies were later dug up and scattered among secondary burial sites in an attempt to hide the evidence. The Srebrenica massacre shocked the conscience of the world and finally spurred more decisive international action. NATO launched Operation Deliberate Force, conducting extensive airstrikes against Bosnian Serb positions in late August and September 1995. On the ground, a joint Bosnian-Croatian offensive pushed back Serb forces, recapturing territory and shifting the military balance. With all parties exhausted and under international pressure, peace negotiations began in November 1995 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. The American diplomat Richard Holbrooke led the talks, bringing together Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic, Croatian President Franjo Tudman, and Bosnian President Alija Izetbegovic. After 3 weeks of intensive negotiations, an agreement was reached. The Dayton Peace Agreement, formally signed in Paris on December 14, 1995, ended the fighting but created a complex and controversial political structure. Bosnia and Herzegovina would remain a single sovereign state, but it would be divided into 2 highly autonomous entities: the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, shared between Bosniaks and Croats, and the Republika Srpska, controlled by Bosnian Serbs. A rotating tripartite presidency would represent the 3 main ethnic groups, with power carefully balanced to prevent any single group from dominating. The war had been devastating beyond measure. Approximately 100,000 people had been killed. More than 2 million had been displaced from their homes, becoming refugees either within Bosnia or in other countries. The economy lay in ruins, with GDP having collapsed to just 20% of its pre-war level. Infrastructure throughout the country had been destroyed. Landmines dotted the countryside. The social fabric that had once held Bosnia's diverse communities together seemed irreparably torn. The immediate post-war years were dominated by reconstruction. NATO deployed 60,000 peacekeepers to enforce the peace, their presence a visible reminder of the international community's commitment to preventing renewed violence. The World Bank, European Union, and various international donors poured billions of dollars into rebuilding roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, and homes. By 2003, the economy had remarkably returned to its pre-war level, though this recovery masked underlying structural weaknesses and continued dependence on foreign aid. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, established in 1993, began the long process of seeking justice for war crimes. Prosecutors gathered evidence and indicted leaders responsible for atrocities. In 2001, the tribunal explicitly ruled that the Srebrenica massacre constituted genocide. Over the following years, dozens of individuals were convicted, including high-ranking political and military leaders. Radovan Karadzic, the wartime Bosnian Serb political leader, was convicted of genocide in 2016 and sentenced to 40 years in prison, later increased to life. Ratko Mladic received a life sentence in 2017. Yet achieving justice in courtrooms could not easily translate to reconciliation on the ground. Bosnia's complex governmental structure, designed to end the war by giving each ethnic group substantial autonomy and veto power, proved remarkably dysfunctional for actual governance. Decision-making became paralyzed by ethnic politics. Nationalist parties continued to dominate elections by stoking fears and emphasizing divisions rather than common interests. The education system reflected these divisions starkly. In parts of the Federation, schools operated under a system called two schools under one roof, where Bosniak and Croat children attended the same building but were taught separate curricula emphasizing different versions of history. Such segregation ensured that new generations grew up with little understanding of or contact with those from different ethnic backgrounds. Economically, Bosnia struggled to transition from its wartime destruction and socialist past to a functional market economy. Unemployment remained stubbornly high, reaching levels above 40% in some areas during the early 2000s. Young people, seeing limited opportunities and frustrated by ethnic politics and corruption, began leaving the country in massive numbers. This brain drain became one of Bosnia's most serious long-term challenges, as the educated and ambitious sought futures elsewhere. Bosnia's path toward European integration has been slow and frustrating. The country applied for European Union membership in February 2016, signaling its commitment to reform and westward orientation. In late 2022, Bosnia was granted candidate status, but the reforms required for EU accession, particularly in areas of rule of law and governance, have proven difficult to implement given the country's divided political structure. The 2020s brought renewed crisis. Milorad Dodik, leader of Republika Srpska since the mid-2000s, increasingly embraced separatist rhetoric and actions. He denied the genocide in Srebrenica, despite international court rulings. He threatened to withdraw Republika Srpska from Bosnia's joint institutions, including the military, judiciary, and tax system. In 2021, when the International High Representative criminalized genocide denial, Dodik responded by refusing to recognize the authority of Bosnia's constitutional court or the High Representative himself. These actions raised alarm among international observers, with some warning that Bosnia faced its greatest existential threat since 1995. The European Union and United States imposed sanctions on Dodik, but their effectiveness remained limited. Russia's support for Bosnian Serb nationalism and China's growing economic presence in the region complicated Western efforts to maintain stability. Yet despite these challenges, Bosnia and Herzegovina has not returned to war. The memory of the 90s remains vivid enough to give most people pause. International peacekeepers, though reduced in number, continue their presence. Many Bosnians, particularly younger generations, express frustration with ethnic politics and seek a future defined by economic opportunity rather than identity. Civil society organizations work across ethnic lines to promote reconciliation and cooperation. Today's Bosnia remains a work in progress, suspended between a traumatic past and an uncertain future. The country's diversity, once a source of richness, continues to be manipulated as a source of division by political leaders who benefit from ethnic tension. Yet that same diversity represents Bosnia's potential, if its people can find ways to build a shared future that honors rather than fears difference. The scars of war remain visible throughout the country. Bullet-pocked buildings in Sarajevo stand as silent witnesses to the siege. The Srebrenica Memorial Center, where thousands of victims have been identified and buried, draws visitors from around the world to remember what happened and resolve that it must never happen again. These physical reminders serve both as warnings and as challenges to current and future generations. As we prepare to conclude our journey through Bosnia and Herzegovina's history in our final section, we stand at this threshold between memory and hope. The country has survived its darkest chapter and avoided returning to war, yet it has not fully achieved peace. In our next and final section, we will explore Bosnia's geography in detail, understanding how the land itself has shaped and continues to shape the story of this resilient nation and its people. Chapter 6: Geography and Regional Context. As we reach the end of our journey through Bosnia and Herzegovina's story, it is time to turn our attention to the land itself. For geography is not merely a backdrop to history, but an active participant in the drama of human events. The mountains, rivers, and valleys of this remarkable country have shaped its past and continue to influence its present. Bosnia and Herzegovina occupies a heart-shaped position at the center of the Balkan Peninsula in southeastern Europe. Covering an area of approximately 51,000 square kilometers, it is a relatively small nation, yet one blessed with remarkable geographical diversity. The country shares its longest border with Croatia, which wraps around from the west to the north. To the east lies Serbia, and to the southeast, Montenegro. Unlike most of its neighbors, Bosnia and Herzegovina is nearly landlocked, possessing only a tiny 20-kilometer strip of coastline on the Adriatic Sea near the town of Niam. The defining feature of Bosnia and Herzegovina's landscape is mountains. Approximately 80% of the country consists of mountainous or hilly terrain, with the remainder comprising valleys and the northern plains. These are not isolated peaks, but part of the Great Dinaric Alps, a mountain chain that sweeps through the Western Balkans from Slovenia to Albania, running northwest to southeast through the heart of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Dinaric Alps were formed tens of millions of years ago during the Alpine orogeny, when the African and European tectonic plates collided, thrusting up these magnificent peaks. The mountains are composed primarily of limestone and dolomite, sedimentary rocks deposited when ancient seas covered this region. Over countless millennia, rainwater has carved through this porous limestone, creating one of Europe's most extensive karst landscapes. Sinkholes, underground rivers, vast caverns, and disappearing streams characterize this terrain, giving it a mysterious, otherworldly quality. The highest peak in Bosnia and Herzegovina is Mount Maglic, standing at 2,386 meters on the border with Montenegro. This mountain, protected within Sutjeska National Park, towers over a landscape of pristine wilderness. Nearby stand other peaks exceeding 2,000 meters: Volujac, Zelengora, Leliha, Treskavica, Bjelašnica, Vranica, Prenj, and Čvarsnica. These mountains hosted the 1984 Winter Olympics, introducing the world to Bosnia's spectacular alpine terrain. Moving northwest, the Dinaric chain continues with slightly lower peaks like Dinara, Shator, and Grumech. These mountains are separated by distinctive karst fields called poljes, flat-floored depressions surrounded by steep limestone walls. The Livanjsko polje, Duvanjsko polje, and Kupreshko polje are among the largest. Their fertile soils supporting agriculture in an otherwise rugged landscape. These poljes flood in winter and drain in summer through underground channels, a natural rhythm that has shaped settlement patterns for centuries. Rivers thread through this mountainous landscape, carving deep valleys and gorges. 7 major rivers define Bosnia and Herzegovina's hydrology. The Sava, forming most of the northern border with Croatia, is the largest. This mighty river drains 76% of the country's territory into the Danube and ultimately the Black Sea. The Una, Sana, and Verbas are tributaries of the Sava, flowing through the northwestern region of Bosanska Krajina in parallel courses from south to north. The Bosna River, from which Bosnia derives its name, is the longest river entirely within the country. It rises near Sarajevo in the central mountains and flows northward for 270 kilometers before joining the Sava. For centuries, this river valley has served as a natural corridor for trade and communication, its course followed by roads connecting the interior to the broader world. The Drina River flows through eastern Bosnia, forming much of the natural border with Serbia. This river, fed by mountain tributaries, cuts through dramatic gorges between steep cliffs. The Drina's emerald waters have inspired poets and painters, becoming almost a character in the region's literature and folklore. Its valley has witnessed migrations, battles, and the quiet passage of countless generations. Only one major river flows south rather than north, the Neretva. This river of Herzegovina carves through the Dinaric Alps in a deep canyon before reaching the Adriatic Sea. The Neretva Valley, with its warmer climate and Mediterranean influences, has always had a character distinct from the rest of Bosnia. The city of Mostar, with its famous bridge spanning the turquoise Neretva, serves as Herzegovina's cultural heart. The climate of Bosnia and Herzegovina varies dramatically across its diverse topography. In the south and west, Mediterranean influences bring mild, wet winters and hot, dry summers. The coastal area near Naim and the Herzegovina lowlands experience the warmest conditions, with temperatures sometimes reaching 40 degrees Celsius in summer. This region supports vineyards, orchards, and olive groves, crops more typical of the Mediterranean than Central Europe. Moving inland and upward, a continental climate prevails. The northern plains along the Sava experience cold winters with temperatures dropping below freezing and warm summers. Central Bosnia, characterized by hills and mid-elevation valleys, has moderate temperatures year-round. In the capital Sarajevo, January temperatures average around -1 degree Celsius, while July averages around 20 degrees. The highest mountains experience an alpine climate, with snow covering the peaks for 8 months each year. These elevated areas receive the most precipitation, sometimes exceeding 2,000 millimeters annually. This abundant moisture feeds the springs and rivers that sustain the lowlands, making the mountains not merely scenic features, but vital water towers for the entire country. Forests blanket much of Bosnia and Herzegovina, covering between 50 and 63% of the land depending on how one measures. This makes it one of the most forested countries in Europe. The forests change with elevation. Oak and hornbeam dominate the lower slopes, giving way to beech and fir at middle elevations. Higher still, coniferous forests of spruce and the endemic Bosnian pine cling to steep mountainsides. At the highest elevations, dwarf pines yield to alpine meadows that burst with wildflowers in summer. Within Sutjeska National Park lies Perućica, one of only 2 remaining primeval forests in Europe. These ancient woods, protected from human interference, contain trees over 400 years old, their massive trunks thick with moss and lichen. Walking through Perućica feels like entering a cathedral of nature, where fallen giants slowly decompose to nourish new growth, and the cycle of life continues as it has for 20,000 years. This diverse geography supports rich biodiversity. Brown bears still roam the remote mountains, along with wolves, wild boar, and lynx. The forests shelter numerous bird species, including rare owls and woodpeckers. Mountain streams harbor endemic trout species. More than 30 types of endemic plants exist in the central Herzegovina mountains alone. Species found nowhere else on Earth, evolved in isolation in these limestone peaks. Human settlement in Bosnia and Herzegovina reflects this varied geography. Approximately 3.2 million people call this country home, though that number has declined significantly due to emigration. About 60% live in urban areas, concentrated in several major cities. Sarajevo, the capital and largest city, nestles in a long valley surrounded by mountains. With a population of approximately 275,000 in the city proper, Sarajevo has been called the Jerusalem of Europe for its religious diversity and the meeting point of East and West for its blend of Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian architecture. The city generates nearly 1/4 of the national economy through administration, manufacturing, and tourism. Banja Luka, the second largest city with about 185,000 residents, serves as the administrative center of Republika Srpska. Located in northwestern Bosnia along the Vrbas River, it is known for tree-lined boulevards and parks. The city sits in a broader valley than Sarajevo, with gentler surrounding hills. Mostar, with approximately 106,000 people, is Herzegovina's main city. Famous for its reconstructed old bridge spanning the Neretva River, Mostar enjoys a warm Mediterranean climate quite different from cities further north. Tuzla and Zenica, both with around 110,000 residents, are important industrial centers in central and northeastern Bosnia. Beyond these cities, countless smaller towns and villages dot the landscape, many perched on hillsides or nestled in valley floors. Traditional stone houses with terracotta roofs cluster around mosque minarets or church steeples, settlements that seem to grow organically from the landscape itself. These villages preserve ways of life that have changed little over centuries, though younger generations increasingly leave for opportunities elsewhere. The mountains that dominate this geography have profoundly shaped Bosnia's history. Throughout the medieval period, these peaks served as natural fortresses, allowing kingdoms and communities to maintain independence longer than their neighbors on open plains. During Ottoman times, mountain valleys offered refuge to those resisting change. In the 20th century, the rugged terrain provided ideal conditions for partisan resistance during World War II, and later became battlegrounds and defensive positions during the 1990s war. Yet these same mountains that offered protection also created isolation. Remote valleys developed their own dialects and customs. Travel between regions remained difficult until modern times. This geographic fragmentation contributed to the development of distinct regional identities within Bosnia and Herzegovina, identities that sometimes aligned with ethnic and religious divisions. Bosnia and Herzegovina's position at the crossroads of civilizations stems partly from its geography. The mountain passes connecting the Adriatic coast to the interior have served as trade routes for millennia. The Sava River Valley in the north provided access to the Pannonian Plain and beyond to Central Europe. The Drina Valley connected to routes eastward toward Constantinople. Control of these passages meant control of commerce, making this land contested throughout history. Today, this geographical position offers both opportunities and challenges. Bosnia and Herzegovina sits on potential transit routes between the European Union and southeastern Europe, with a 932-kilometer border with EU member Croatia. Yet the mountainous terrain makes infrastructure development expensive. Many villages remain isolated, accessible only by winding mountain roads. The country's natural beauty has begun attracting tourism, particularly adventure tourism. The mountains offer hiking, climbing, and skiing. The rivers provide opportunities for rafting and kayaking, especially on the Una and Neretva. The Via Dinarica, a long-distance hiking trail, crosses the country's wildest landscapes. Historic cities like Sarajevo and Mostar draw cultural tourists interested in the region's complex heritage. As we conclude our journey through Bosnia and Herzegovina's history and geography, certain themes emerge. This is a land where nature itself seems to reflect the human story, beauty intertwined with harshness, diversity encompassing tension. The same mountains that create stunning vistas also divide communities. The rivers that sustain life also mark boundaries. The forests that shelter wildlife once concealed armies. Yet the land endures. Rivers continue flowing as they have for millennia, carving ever deeper into ancient limestone. Seasons cycle through their eternal rhythm, snow giving way to spring flowers, summer warmth yielding to autumn colors, winter returning again to rest beneath white blankets. The mountains stand as they have stood, silent witnesses to human dramas that are but moments in geological time. In this perspective, Bosnia and Herzegovina's recent troubles appear as one more chapter in a very long story, a story written in stone and water, forest and meadow. The land remembers all who have walked upon it, from Illyrian shepherds to Roman legionaries, from Ottoman warriors to Austrian bureaucrats, from partisan fighters to modern citizens seeking peace. All have left their marks, yet all have passed. What remains constant is the land itself, patient and enduring. The Bosna River will flow toward the Sava whether the people along its banks live in harmony or conflict. Mount Maglich will stand regardless of what boundaries humans draw across maps. The primeval forests of Perućica will continue their ancient cycles, indifferent to political arrangements in distant capitals. Perhaps there is wisdom in this geological perspective, a reminder that human conflicts, however intense, are temporary against the permanence of mountains and rivers. The challenge for Bosnia and Herzegovina's people is to find ways of living that harmonize with, rather than fight against, the diverse nature of their homeland. Just as different trees grow at different elevations, each adapted to its particular conditions yet part of one forest ecosystem, so too might different communities find ways to coexist within their shared geography. As night falls over Bosnia and Herzegovina, lights begin twinkling in valley towns, warm points of human presence against dark mountain silhouettes. Somewhere, the Drina flows on through moonlit gorges. Snow lies quiet on high peaks. Ancient forests breathe in darkness. The land sleeps as it has slept through countless nights, waiting patiently for dawn. And so we leave Bosnia and Herzegovina, this small country with such a large story, this crossroads of civilizations nestled among eternal mountains. May its future be as enduring as its landscape, as diverse as its geography, as life-giving as its rivers, and as peaceful as a forest untouched by human conflict. May its people find rest, as we find rest, knowing that whatever tomorrow brings, the land will remain patient and beautiful, waiting for those who call it home.